Not every film is perfect. In fact, if you watch a film with the intent of finding faults, continuity errors, or character discrepancies, you're more than likely to find something in every film you watch. And we're here today to talk about infamous movie plot holes that got so out of hand that the filmmakers actually had to step in and say, whoa, okay, let's settle this once and for all. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is Whatculture.com, and these are 8 infamous movie plot holes that were solved by filmmakers. Number 8. A different origin. Monsters University. Sometimes all it takes to create a plot hole is one line of dialogue. And in Monsters, Inc., whilst walking down the street, Billy Crystal's Mike gives audiences the passing line, "You've been jealous of my looks since the 4th grade." It's the kind of dialogue put in place in order for us to understand the two protagonists' relationship, that they've known each other all the way back since elementary school. Fast forward 12 years to the release of a prequel film called Monsters University, which shows us that Mike and Sully haven't known each other since the 4th grade, but that they met at Scare School. Now, whilst this creates a glaring hole in the continuity of the series, director Pete Docter, who produced the prequel, said he knew that the film would create a plot hole, but that he elected to ignore it because he wanted to create a film centered around what university would be like for these monsters. It's an honest enough reason, and it ended up paying off, as Monsters University ended up being a solid success. However, he ruined it by later suggesting that the whole 4th grade thing is an expression used by monsters in everyday speech, which isn't exactly the best explanation that he could have given. Oh well, at least we got these great films right. Number 7. Familiar Faces. Back to the Future. Now, this is one of cinema's most talked about plot holes, the kind that caused arguments and endless debates since the film's release in 1985. Until recently, the plot hole hasn't actually been officially solved by those behind it, but after James Gunn said that Back to the Future was one of his examples of a perfect film despite its plot holes, screenwriter Bob Gale took the opportunity to try and clear the air during an interview with The Hollywood Reporter. In the film, Marty McFly goes back in time, causes some trouble, and must work to make sure that his parents get together. He succeeds to create some other plot holes, and they live happily ever after. That is until the sequel. But the question is then, why don't George and Lorraine recognize their grown-up son is the spitting image of their old friend Calvin Klein? According to Bob Gale, it's really quite simple. George and Lorraine only know Calvin Klein for 8 days during high school when they were only 17, so it's actually quite acceptable that they forgot his face over time. Many people can't remember who they went to school with at all, let alone the people that they only knew for a week. Ultimately, he said, if they remembered anything, they probably would have just thought it was funny that they once knew somebody with the same name as a fashion brand. Number 6. A simpler ending. Inside Out. Now, this plot hole is one of those in hindsight things that audiences just love to pick apart, kind of like Revenge of the Sith, when it clearly would have made more sense to take a whole Jedi council in order to take down Palpatine. Anyway, that's a different point. Now, Inside Out came out to rave reviews in 2015 and followed the personified emotions of the film's human protagonist Riley. After an important memory is lost, joy and sadness must venture deep into Riley's mind in order to retrieve it. After they realize that they've been trapped and can't get back to the control room, they begin to look for another way to return. So where's the plot hole, you ask? Well, as the two are pondering their options, they come across some maintenance workers who have the ability to send memories to the control room. Joy and sadness, however, decide to conveniently miss the chance of returning to where they belong and go on an epic emotional journey through Riley's mind. Now, director Pete Docter has gone on the record to say that the plot hole is too nitpicky, focusing on something that younger audiences aren't likely to pick up on. He admitted that he saw the issue in the production of the film, but decided to bypass it in order to give us this brilliant journey that the emotions go on. If they'd used the maintenance workers to get back to the control room, we wouldn't have got Bing Bong or the beautiful ending we were left with. So you know what? It's all good. Number 5. The Rainmaker. Looper. Now, Looper is riddled with discrepancies. Most are small and inconsequential to the overall picture, but there is one in particular which is an utter head-scratcher, and is all to do with the villain of the story, the Rainmaker. You see, in the film, Joe is a looper, a hitman who kills people sent back in time by a vicious crime syndicate. On one of his missions, Joe realizes that his latest target is his future self. Old Joe escapes before he can be killed, and in an alternate timeline, we get to see what old Joe's life was like, a timeline in which Joe killed the old Joe. There, the future shows a guy called the Rainmaker is destroying the crime syndicate and closing the loops used to move the targets. In the main timeline, old Joe hunts the Rainmaker as a young child and tries to kill him, but Joe kills himself and old Joe by default, saving the young Rainmaker and potentially altering the future of the loops. However, it's suggested in the film that the Rainmaker is created because old Joe kills his mother. When Joe kills himself, Sarah is saved too, meaning that the Rainmaker never becomes what he becomes, and old Joe never goes back in time to kill Sarah, meaning that it's one big clusterfuck, which director Rian Johnson puts down as an idea that there may be alternate realities where every possible outcome is being lived. All in all, Looper is a good film, but yeah, some of this stuff, bit weird, right? Number 4. A Lazy Vendetta, Star Trek 2009. When the Star Trek reboot came out, it was actually quite impressive and full of great performances, visuals, callbacks, and villains. The first villain of the trilogy was Eric Bana's wonderfully sinister Nero, a Romulan miner whose planet was destroyed in 2387. Seeking revenge on those he thought responsible for the tragedy, in this case Spock, he ended up being transported to 2233, creating an alternate reality that reset the whole Star Trek timeline. It was a clever little narrative device which gave the opportunity to tackle the vast Star Trek universe from new and exciting angles. However, from Nero's trip comes a slight hitch. Arriving in the new timeline in 2233, he didn't seek revenge for over 25 years. So why wait such a long time for such a big ploy? Well, the answer, as it turns out, can be found in a deleted scene courtesy of director J.J. Abrams. The scene states that Nero waited for Spock from the old timeline to join him in the new one, and during this time, Nero was imprisoned by Klingons and couldn't conduct his plans. It sounds like a scene that probably should have been left in, or failing that, Abrams could have at least tried to make Nero a more understandable bad guy. Either way, there's your explanation to the strange and underdeveloped plot point. Number 3. The Bifrost, Thor. The first Thor outing wasn't exactly the MCU's best effort, but it still managed to set up a great future for the God of Thunder and his mischievous brother Loki. The emotional climax of the film, wherein Thor confronts his brother, sees the destruction of the Bifrost, the magical bridge which links Asgard to Earth. So the question is, how could Thor return to the franchise if he had no way of getting back to Earth? Well, in Avengers, Thor returns with little issue, intent on capturing Loki and bringing him home to face judgment for his actions. But how did Thor get back? Loki makes a passing comment about the use of dark magic, but aside from that, there's no real explanation. That is, until Avengers Infinity War. At the beginning of Infinity War, Heimdall calls to the Allfather to let their dark power pass through him one last time. That's right, the Russo brothers, creators of numerous plot holes within Endgame, actually used its predecessor to solve an MCU mystery. It was Heimdall who aided Thor in his return to Earth all those years ago, and he achieved it through the use of ancient magic. Showing things happen on screen, it appears, is a strong way of filling in that plot hole, even if it does take 7 years. Then again, they never explain how the bridge is fixed by Dark World, which kind of cheapens the emotional ending of the first film. Oh well. Number 2. Cypher's Betrayal, The Matrix. 1999's best sci-fi action flick, The Matrix, has stood the test of time to become one of cinema's best creations and widely influential films. Directed by the Wachowskis, this film sees Thomas Anderson/Neo find out that he's trapped inside a simulated reality created by a load of hyper-intelligent machines. Uncovering the truth about this world, Neo embarks on a journey to free humankind from the Matrix. As the film reveals, in order to travel in and out of the Matrix simulation, you have to have an operator, somebody who aids your journey after you take the red pill. And the plot hole of this film comes with Cypher, who double-crosses the protagonists and is able to travel in and out of the simulation without an operator. Killing former allies Tank and Dozer, there should be no way for Cypher to meet up with Agent Smith. According to the Wachowskis, Neo walks in on Cypher at one point writing a code which actually allowed him to enter the Matrix without an operator, but this isn't fully noticeable or explained in the film itself. It's a reasonable explanation for the plot hole on the surface, but it does feel kind of cheap when you consider the rules the film has put in place. If Cypher can make a code like this, why are operators needed at all? It's a bit of an oversight, but the film definitely rules nonetheless. And number 1, the big door debate, Titanic. Of all proposed movie plot holes, Titanic has the most iconic and talked about. Over the years, it's become more of a pop culture joke rather than a matter of debate, but that still doesn't make it any less intriguing. You see, after the ship sinks, Rose and Jack are trapped in the freezing ocean. Luckily, a big door happens to be floating by, and Rose is able to climb on board as Jack stays submerged in the water until eventually he freezes to death. It begs the infamous question though, why couldn't Jack get on the door as well? Well, according to director James Cameron, it's clear that Jack tries to get on the door but can't because it begins to topple over. Jack, Cameron says, isn't stupid, and the whole thing really isn't that big a deal. In 2013, Mythbusters also came to the same conclusion, showing that such a raft wouldn't hold two characters. However, they also agreed that there was a way for both Jack and Rose to get on it, and it involved tying Rose's life vest under the door, giving it enough buoyancy to keep Jack alive. But Cameron dismissed this though a few years later when he said that there was no way Jack, in freezing water under that level of stress and shock, would ever have thought to use Rose's jacket in order to save himself. Cameron's final assessment is that the Mythbusters episode was fun, but the guys were full of shit. Oh, that's nice.